Welcome everyone. The last two times that we met, we talked about sadhana. And basically the scope, the way this whole philosophy module has been shaped is that we started with the most broad. We started kind of both historically way back and also the most broad kind of cosmology. You know, the evolution of consciousness is like a basic framework, a basic cosmology that flows through, underlies and informs the paths of yoga. So we talked about the evolution of consciousness, cosmic energies of light and darkness, these kind of basic, fundamental, broad things. Then we kind of got a little more specific as far as, okay, so in the evolution of consciousness, there's this process of purification that happens. And we talked about kind of the tension between the ego, the smaller self, the frontal being, and the deeper self, and this sense of sacrifice or offering the smaller to the larger, the lower to the higher, the, you know, like that. And then we talked about sadhana. Okay, so what do you do, right? Like, what are the practices? There's practices that are about will and intention and tapas and heat and fire. And there's practices that are about surrender and, you know, exploring both of those sides of sadhana. And now we come to the paths of yoga. So I've said many times before that yoga is a many-branched river with many tributaries that split off. You know, it's like this giant glacier up in the Himalayas that starts dripping and becomes the Ganga and becomes this, you know, source, this flow. At Gangotri is the place where the Ganga emerges from the glacier. Gomukh, the cow's mouth, it's called. It looks like the mouth of a cow. The Ganga comes out there, and it's one glacier, still, essentially, still, like, meaning not moving, right? And then it comes into motion. So it's beyond movement, beyond time. I mean, I'm making a kind of metaphor here, that these teachings, still permanent, beyond time, beyond space, beyond movement, come flowing into movement. They pass through the mouth of the cow, and they come flowing into time and space and into movement, but it's one. And then as soon as it hits the first rock, it bifurcates. And as soon as, you know, the tributaries start breaking off, then you've got one big river here and one big river there. And then each of the big rivers has smaller rivers and smaller rivers. And in the case of the teachings of yoga, it's like this primordial wisdom that transcends time and space is one wisdom. It's one truth about the nature of reality. And then it pours into time and space and interfaces with life as it is and passes through the forms, the beings of individual human teachers who channelize it, put it into words, put it into systems. And some of those teachings, some of those channels have been written down, and those are the texts that we have. And some of them have just been passed through the Guru Shishya Parampara, the teacher-student lineage. Parampara is this fascinating word. It's like, you know, it kind of means what it sounds like, parampara. It's like the way that the teachings flow through lineages from teacher to student, and down and down and down. And so each of these is shaped by the vessel, by the unique personality, the unique space and time, the unique culture, the unique language, you know, everything about this individual teacher who's teaching, this one teaching passes through that teacher. And it also, it's not just the unique personality and culture and language and social milieu of the teacher, but it's the circumstances of life that are calling forth a particular, that have a particular need. So the circumstances of life in the Punjab in 1265 were very unique, and the circumstances of life in Tamil Nadu in 642 were very unique. and they called forth a particular permutation of teaching. And so that's, you get these teachings that are shaped and differentiated, and then, it's a little bit like the telephone game, when one person passes it on and then it goes off in this direction, and then somebody sometimes is like, hold on, I don't think that's where we should be going, let's bring it back. And so they have these great synthesizers. Vyas, the name Vyas, who is the name of the person who compiled the Vedas, and who also wrote the Puranas, many of the Puranas, and who also wrote the commentary to the Yoga Sutras. I mean, it's not probably, if we look at it from a Western rational scientific perspective, what some people in the West would call reality, it couldn't have been one person doing all these things. But the name basically means compiler or synthesizer, like the one who synthesizes all the stuff. And the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is doing the same thing. He's synthesizing. The Yoga Sutras are that. It's a synthesis. So throughout time, there's people who kind of take all these various strands and combine them and synthesize them into one cohesive teaching. So there's the kind of going out and then the coming back in, and the going out and the coming back in. And there's not one yoga path in India. There's many, but there's kind of, so just like there's not, there's the Ganga, there's the Yamuna, there's the Narmada, there's these different rivers, there's the Indus, all these different rivers are rivers and tributaries, and the tributaries come in and out and in and out and in and out. And the rivers themselves don't necessarily intersect, but they all meet in the ocean. They all join in the vast ocean. So they all start in the still unmanifest, they pour into existence, and they meet in the ocean of life. And I was, Corinne asked me today, why did I choose Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga as those three? Because there's other things, there's other ways to classify all this. And I said it's because in the Bhagavad Gita, that's the yoga that Krishna, that's what the kind of 3-part yoga that Krishna teaches in the Bhagavad Gita. And then I realized, actually, that's not why I did it that way. I mean, it is true that that's the case, but Sri Aurobindo wrote a big book called The Synthesis of Yoga. It's about 1,100 pages. And in the Synthesis of Yoga, he presents Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga as 3 paths of yoga, and then he attempts to synthesize them into one. And he says specifically at the beginning of the text, he says there's different approaches, like Hatha Yoga, for example, addresses the physical body. And the physical body is, in Hatha Yoga, the intention is to perfect and exceed the limitations of the physical body. Let me just see bodily perfection, eternal youth, balancing the nervous system, purifying the nervous system. And he says, that's all really important as far as, well, first of all, he says the aim of yoga is union with the divine. I mean, that's, we talk about yoga as a series of practices that leads to, that supports a process or a journey, an adventure on the way to a state. And that state of yoga, that state of union, is one state. So it's not like all these different yogas are leading to all different places. Now, of course, certain teachings might lead people to different stages of development. Certain teachings might first take someone to a certain place. For example, if a practice is heavily focused on meditation that is completely about meditating on nothingness, then the direction that one goes when they, achieve perfection in that method is going to be they're going to realize nothingness. But that's not the end. Nothingness is not the end. Nothingness is not the universe. So these paths, while they may take someone to a certain place first, there's only one reality in the end. So yoga can only mean one thing. And all the yogas have to lead back to that one undivided, permanent font, the gomukh, the cow's mouth, out of which everything manifest and unmanifest comes. So there can only be one state of final destination, let's say, for all these paths of yoga. And so Sri Aurobindo is saying that final destination is, and actually I have the specific quote, yoga is a methodized effort towards self-perfection and the expression of the secret potentialities latent in the being. So that's the process part. So it's practices, methodized effort, methodized practices towards self-perfection. So self-perfection is the destination. The expression of the secret potentialities latent in the being, that's kind of what happens along the way. And a union of the human individual with the universal and transcendent existence we see partially expressed in humanity and the cosmos. So it's a method towards self-perfection. That's the state of yoga. He's using the word self-perfection. And I know the word perfection is a little complicated in our modern parlance, but that's the word he uses, self-perfection. And he's not ashamed of it. He doesn't, he's very clear that that's the right word. He means it. But we can talk about that later. Self-perfection and a union of the human individual, me, you, us, individuals, with the universal and transcendent existence we see partially expressed in humanity and the cosmos. So that oneness, that divine oneness, the spark of creation, the energy of creation. So yoga is a union of this being, this individuality, and you and every individuality with that transcendent, universal and transcendent oneness. Universal meaning everything in the entire cosmos that ever is, was, or will be, every manifest reality that ever could possibly exist, and transcendent, all that which does not manifest, all that which is beyond manifestation, which does not exist, does not come into form. So a union of this individual with all that, that's yoga, that's the state, and that's the state to which all yogas are eventually pointing. Again, some paths might go by a different route to get there, but that's the state. And he says a given system of yoga is a compression into narrower and more energetic terms of intensity. So a compression of the general methods which are already being used loosely by nature. So he says nature is always in a state of yoga, and this is the evolution of consciousness that we've talked about before. Nature is in a process of exceeding itself and reaching toward this union of the individual with the divine. That's the whole purpose of the whole thing, the whole game, the whole existence. The point of it is self-perfection and the union of the individual with the universal and transcendent. So every system of yoga is a compression of all this stuff that nature is doing over millions and millions and hundreds of thousands and many, 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 many years, billions of years. All the permutations, all the wanderings that nature is using to exceed itself and conquer its limitations. Yoga, a system of yoga, is a compression of those. And so he's saying, and he also says, no synthesis of these yoga systems can be satisfying, which does not, in its aim, reunite God and nature in a liberated and perfected human life. So bringing together the divine, the transcendent, the perfect, the one, with nature, with this reality that we're in, that we live in. Earth, volcanoes, sharks, fingernails, all the stuff, uniting it with that transcendent, eternal, cosmic, universal one in life. So all these yogas are headed in the same direction. And so Sri Aurobindo, he says, Hatha Yoga and Raja Yoga, he basically takes these three examples, Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga, and this trifecta, work, or service, love, and knowledge is what he calls it. Service, love, and knowledge. Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. So he says there's that, and then there's Raja Yoga and Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga seeks to perfect the body. Raja Yoga seeks to perfect and purify the mind through meditation, through samadhi, which he calls trance, in entering into trance states, transcendent states, you could say. I think that's probably where the word trance comes from, transcendent states. And kind of purifying the mind and clarifying the mind in those states. And then he says, what this other path, this synthesized path of jnana, bhakti, and karma is trying to do, is trying to purify the will, the mind, and the heart. The intellect, the heart, and the will. Trying to purify the life, trying to clarify the life. And so that's going back to the beginning of this thread. That's why I chose these three, because this is what Sri Aurobindo takes up in his synthesis of yoga, is these three paths. And he says basically the main limitation of these three paths is that mostly people see them as three different things. People are practicing them in exclusion. People are either practicing jnana yoga, which means they're reading scriptures and meditating and trying to transcend the limitations of the mind, or they're practicing bhakti yoga and they're trying to purify the emotions and uplift all of their emotions into emotions in relationship with the divine instead of in the relationship with entanglements on the human level. Or they're practicing seva, service, selfless service, and karma yoga, and trying to achieve union with the divine through that means. But he's basically saying like an integral yoga, which was what he was seeking, has to synthesize all of these into one. And that's why I chose to focus on these three. And we're going to spend some time today going through the three different paths. It's funny, I thought maybe I didn't have that much to say about these things, but it's already 20 minutes and we haven't even started yet. So the three words that are the title of this conversation and also in the article, karma, jnana, and bhakti. Right? Karma is, you may have heard the word karma before, right? Karma is like, specifically in Sanskrit, it refers to action, stuff that we do. So the way we use karma to talk about like coming back around and, karma bites you in the end or something, like this kind of sense of divine justice or sometimes even divine retribution. It's the actions that we do that have reverberations out into the universe, and the universe is responsive. And so it sends the consequences of our actions back to us lovingly for the benefit of our self-realization. That's the sense of karma in the way that it's most normally used. But essentially the word just means action. So karma yoga is action, like making all of our actions yoga. And bhakti yoga, bhakti, the word basically means devotional love. So bhakti yoga is the yoga of devotional love. Comes from the root huj, which is like love and devotion, reverence, the natural love that a part has towards the whole of which it is a part. So the cells of your body have bhakti towards you. Otherwise, you don't exist. They don't play. They don't cooperate. Every organ in your body has bhakti towards the wholeness that is you. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And whether, no matter how dysfunctional we may consider it, all human systems that exist, our cities, our companies, our countries, every one of them exists because of the bhakti of the individual to the collective. And of course, it's not black and white. It's not linear. It's not everybody feels the same way. Everybody's got a different expression. But if that bhakti wasn't there, the thing wouldn't work. Nobody would, the people holding the systems together just wouldn't do what they're doing. They're doing it out of a sense of bhakti. Now, they may be consciously doing it for all kinds of different reasons. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that they're doing it reflects some kind of devotion to the whole. And Jnana. And I'm going to pronounce it Jnana, even though my understanding is that in Sanskrit, it's actually pronounced Jñana. And I think I've mentioned this before. But in Hindi, that symbol is pronounced Gya, and we're going to call it Jnana for now. It's because it's easier for me to say. Simply that. And because most people say that. Most people would pronounce that J, Enya, J with the Enya after it. They would pronounce that Gya. Jnana is knowledge. Gya is basically that root means knowledge, wisdom, intelligence. So Jnana Yoga is yoga of the intelligence, yoga of the mind. And let's start there, because we've talked some about this path, the Jnana path, not maybe explicitly, but the story of Nachiketa and death that we've talked about before in the Katha Upanishad. Nachiketa goes to death and says what happens after one dies, what happens after a person dies. And death puts him through tests, and Nachiketa passes the tests. And the tests are basically temptations. And death at a certain point says, you have chosen the good over the pleasant. You've discerned between what is good and what is pleasurable. And what he's saying is good, what death is calling good in this sense, is Nachiketa's desire to know. That's all it is. He wants to know what happens after we die. He wants to understand this basic aspect of reality that we're all living with all the time. So that's Jnana Yoga. He wants to know. He wants to understand. He wants that understanding to enlighten him and inspire him. Jnana Yoga is also a process of, as Ramana Maharshi teaches it, of elimination. So Ramana Maharshi teaches this process of self-inquiry. Who am I? And it's through this who am I, am I my thoughts? Am I my beliefs? Am I my clothes? Am I my ideas? Am I other people's judgments of me? Am I my job? Who am I? So we eliminate all the things. No, I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm not that. And eventually we come to the mind, the nature of the mind. When the mind is purified, when the mind releases all of its entanglements with what it assumes is knowledge, the state of the mind is peace, tranquility, and emptiness. That's where Jnana Yoga leads at a certain point, is to this tranquility, peace, and emptiness. This is nirvana. This is the essence of nirvana. Is like the candle is blown out. There's nothing left. And that's the kind of essence of Jnana Yoga, is this, quieter. Watch the thoughts. Disidentify with the thoughts. The more we watch the thoughts and see that the thoughts are not me, and see that the thoughts are just passing through, things start to settle. We have this image of the mind as a tranquil lake with no ripples, a still pond with no wind blowing, no ripples. We have yogas chitti vritti nirodha. The mind, the chitta, vrittis, the chitta vrittis, the manifestations of the mind, the whirling of the mind, are nirodha, are stilled, are quieted. This is the path and the terrain through which the path of Jnana Yoga passes. Jnana Yoga is a process of developing viveka using vichara. Viveka is discernment. And ultimately, and we have a whole session on Sankhya, you may remember, which is a path of Jnana Yoga, understanding the nature of the universe. It's the viveka that we're looking for is the discernment between prakriti and purusha, that which is manifest and that which is eternal, that which is temporary and that which is eternal. Discerning between those two things, that which is manifest and that which is permanent and unmanifest. So we use vichara, which is basically like reflection, inner reflection, contemplation and meditation. Contemplation is contemplation of a topic. And, we can read spiritual texts, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, Buddhist texts, the Sankhya Karika, commentaries on these things, the Dhammapada. These texts, they all will bring us into contact with the energy of this mental purification. And as we contemplate the deeper realities of these texts that are being suggested by the author, our minds settle. So this is a sadhana. Reading these texts is a sadhana of Jnana Yoga, contemplation. We can also close our eyes and contemplate any of these things. We can also meditate, meditation, focused meditation. So focusing on one thing. We talked about this a bit in the sadhana of tapas. The focus, if we meditate and focus on one thing, it builds our capacity to focus. We become more able to focus on one thing. The mind becomes more still, less distractible. It's like building a muscle. So these are the sadhanas of Jnana Yoga. Listening to, a teacher. But they're all leading towards the purification of the mind. And the knowledge of oneself, it's like everything that we think we are, this lower self, this ego, this confused, isolated, separated, dualistic self. In Jnana Yoga, the teaching is that everything that we assume ourselves to be is an illusion. It's not real. It's a trick of perception. And so it's basically whittling away those things until they're all gone and there's nothing left. We attain freedom, kaivalya, moksha, through understanding. So, yeah. I think that's it on Jnana Yoga. And I'll talk a bit now about Karma Yoga. In the Rig Veda, the Vedas are not the Rig Veda, the Vedas as a whole, which includes the Upanishads, the Aranyakas, the Brahmanas, and the Samhitas, they are comprised of two different parts, Karma Kanda and Jnana Kanda. So Jnana Kanda in the Vedas is like the Upanishads, like that story I told you from the Katha Upanishad. Katha Upanishad is considered Jnana Kanda. Karma Kanda are the parts of the Vedas that are about the rituals. How do you do certain Vedic rituals? How many mantras do you say? How many times do you do it? What do you put in the fire? What's the order? It's like that. It's about what you do, but it's about the rituals. And Karma Yoga basically jumps off from that starting point and says, assume that position, that posture. So what you would be doing as far as, in doing a Vedic ritual. Imagine you're a Vedic priest and you have the big fire in front of you. And you're going to be reciting mantras and putting things into the fire. and you're going to do it in a very certain order, and you're going to do it with a very deliberate consciousness. You're making an offering to the divine. This is important. The order is important. The intonation of the mantra is important. What goes into the fire is important. Everything is important and deliberate and intentional. So it's basically, karma yoga is saying, take that same attitude and apply it to your whole life. That everything matters. That every gesture matters. That everything can be intentional, done with reverence, done with offering, done with a sense of you're in relationship with the divine. That everything is an offering to the divine. This is karma yoga. It's taking the spirit, the attitude of the Vedic ritual and applying it to everything that one does. So that every action, every conversation, every relationship, every word that we say, everything that we do has that quality of an offering. And we release the sense that, first of all, that I get anything back for anything that I do. Because in the Vedic ritual at the end, everything is in the fire. Everything has been turned to ash. There's nothing left. You don't get anything at the end of that. You don't walk away with a parting gift. It's all in the fire. And so in karma yoga, it's the same way. All of our actions are thrown into the fire and they burn up. And what's left is the ash. So we don't get anything. We don't get the fruits of our actions. If I do something with the complete sense of releasing it and not expecting anything back in return. This is the spirit of karma yoga. Work, actions, relationships, words, images, social media posts, boundaries, contracts, artwork, relationships, emails, photographs. Everything can be an offering. Everything can be done for me, for the sense that I'm going to get something out of it, or it can be done as an offering to the divine. The other thing that goes is the sense that I am even doing it. The sense that I am the doer. So increasingly, it's not, and I is like my strategic self, my kind of intelligence that is, figuring out how to navigate life, planning, organizing, making arrangements. Increasingly, that being is not actually doing anything. The actions begin to flow from a deeper place, seamlessly, fluidly. And the will, just like Jnana Yoga is about purifying the mind, in Karma Yoga, it's the will that is purified. We have these different conflicting wills in us all the time. Should I, I'm driving and I want to check the text message, but I know I shouldn't. There's two pulls, the pull to check the text messages and the pull not to. So Karma Yoga is about purifying the will. So there's not two, there's only one. And it's not a polarity. It's not like one of those two options wins. It's an absolute fluidity of being, so that whatever is needed in the moment, which is most aligned with the deeper self, the higher being, the divine, whatever is most natural and needed in that moment will happen. Now, this is again, I was talking about in Jnana Yoga, there's the process and there's the direction that it leads. It leads to a state of calmness in the mind. Karma Yoga leads to this state of fluidity in action. Fluidity, simplicity, things are not thought through, strategized, plus and minus, make a list, pick the best of the two. It's just one flow of action. And the relationship to regret is different. Increasingly, as the action flows through, there's a sense of acceptance. There's a sense of that is what I did at that time in those circumstances, and I may not do that now under those circumstances, but I understand that that's the way things were flowing. Now, it's easy to twist that and not be in that state and use that. The ego can always use everything. The ego will always take every spiritual teaching and every spiritual state and turn it to its own purposes. So the ego can say, oh yeah, I'm there, and so I don't have any regret for anything that I've done. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about a distortion by the ego. We're talking about the authentic state of fluidity where all action is actually coming from the divine. And that's a very high state of realization, a very high state of yogic realization that I do not claim. And anyway, so I just wanted to be clear that I'm not advising everybody to let go of regret and let go of remorse. And because right now, my ego is acting in my life. My lower self is acting, grasping, clinging, craving, hating, pushing away, all these things. And so the natural emotion of remorse and regret that comes from acting in a way that isn't in alignment with my higher self is appropriate and useful. Self-hatred, not so much. Self-hatred is never useful. Shame is never useful. But gosh, I wish I wouldn't have done that. And I'm going to try not to do it next time. Is different. So we release the fruits of our actions and we release the sense that we are the doer. In the yoga tradition, in the Jnana yoga tradition, especially in the Raja yoga tradition, there's this sense that stillness is better than action. And I mentioned before in a previous session that part of the practice of tapas, the intention behind the practice of tapas, and in this case I'm talking about austerities, was to purify karmas that we carry with us from past lives. So instead of acting out the karmas, the intention was to purify them by sitting still or by suffering. Inflicting intentional suffering on the physical being will just burn up all the karmas at once, and then we'll be free. That'll speed up the whole process. Has been an understanding in different yoga lineages, and that's the Buddha actually went out in that direction and then came back into the middle. He was practicing severe austerities, not eating, not sleeping, staying outside, sitting in the sun. I don't think he actually said the specific things that he was doing, but he was with these intense austerity-driven orders of monks. And a lot of yoga paths went in that direction. The part of the purpose of that was to burn up karmas from previous lives. And the understanding was when all the karmas are burned up, then one is free. In karma yoga, the understanding is that those karmas will be burned up through the interaction with life. So in Jnana yoga, this particular flavor of Jnana yoga, the understanding was you just sit still and do something painful. And then that will burn up the karmas. So, and the more you sit still, you withdraw yourself from this world. You're not creating new karmas. You're not engaging with this world. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, yeah, but that's all well and good, but your heart is still beating and you're still breathing, even if you're sitting perfectly still. You're still engaging with this world. You can't get out of it. If you're alive, you're engaging with this world. So you might as well walk around. You might as well interact with people. And the sense of karma yoga is that the karmas are getting burned off through interaction with people. Now, if you interact with someone, and there's this understanding that everything that comes to you in your life is a result of a past karma or, a reverberation of a past karma. So if somebody comes and yells at you, that's a reverberation of a past karma. Now, you can do many different things, but just to polarize it, you can yell back, or you can accept and give love to that person, offer love to that person. And yelling back, insult, let's just not just yelling, but let's say like insulting, demeaning, belittling, the things that you really want to do. Most people, let's say, I don't want to say you, maybe you don't really want to do those things, but some people may want to belittle, demean, crush, destroy. Those are actions that are not aligned with a deeper self and that actually are counter-evolutionary actions. They pull us away from a deeper understanding of ourselves. And so those actions are going to create more karma that is going to then have to reverberate back to us because we didn't get the lesson. If the person yells at us and we absorb their whatever they're going through, recognize that they're suffering and honor them while having an appropriate, clarity of boundary without taking on their suffering as if it's our own and we need to fix it, but just honor the truth of their suffering. And, the degree to which there's no response at all, there's no karma being created in that situation. Now, there may be karma we may not create karma outside, but we may create karma in our mind by thinking about all the things that we want to do to the person for the next week. That's still creating karma. It's saying to the universe, hey, I still don't get that I'm not separate. I still don't get that I don't have to fight. I still don't get that I am part of this oneness and that other person is me and we are one and there is no enemy anywhere. Can you teach me, please? Because I still don't get it. That's what we're saying to the universe. And the universe is like, yeah, sure, no problem. I'll give you another one. Don't worry. Just wait a little while. Let you recover from that, and then I'll give you another one. So this is the basic framework and the basis of karma yoga. And this tension between stillness and action is emphasized a lot in the Bhagavad Gita because that's an argument that was happening at that time when the text was written, was that stillness is better than action. And Krishna goes to great lengths to say, hey, you can't ever be really still, actually. And so just act, but act without the sense that you're doing it, and act without attachment to the fruits of your actions, and offer every action to me. Those are basically the three things. Offer every act as if you're not the doer, act as if you're not entitled to the fruits of your action, and offer every action to me, meaning to Krishna, meaning to the divine. Neem Karoli Baba, who was the guru of Ram Das and Krishna Das, and had a huge influence on yoga in the West. He didn't say a lot of things, but one of the things he said a lot was love everyone, serve everyone, feed people, and remember God. And that's basically it. Love everyone, serve everyone, feed people, and remember God. This is karma yoga. Remembering God as we're acting, loving people as we're acting, serving people as we're acting, feeding people through our actions, and remembering God all the time, making all of our actions an offering, which goes back to the karma kanda in the Vedas. Doing everything that we do with the attitude of offering to the divine, not just as some abstraction. I mean, Sri Aurobindo, no synthesis of yoga can be satisfying, which does not, in its aim, reunite God and nature in a liberated and perfect human life. All yogas require the divine and grace because it is that to which we are aspiring and seeking to exceed our current state. Yoga requires the transcendent, because he basically says this uplifting, this self-exceeding is a partnership between God, nature, and humanity. And if it's just nature and humanity that are partnering up, but there's no God, they can't really get out of their own trappings. They're tied to each other. There needs to be something transcendent towards which we're reaching, and that is lifting us up. This grace that's lifting us up. So we think of karma yoga in the context of seva often. When you hear the word karma yoga, people are talking sometimes about seva, which is selfless service, but often will be cooking food at a soup kitchen, or volunteering at a school, or doing some kind of, service for, or at an animal shelter, doing some kind of service for people. And that can obviously, that's a great way to practice karma yoga, because inherently, aside from feeling good about ourselves or telling other people and letting them feel good about us, there's not an immediate takeaway from those things. So they're a good framework to practice karma yoga, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be everything and anything that we do. So Bhakti. There's a text called the Bhakti Sutras. And the way Bhakti is described there in the Bhakti Sutras at the beginning, Narada's Bhakti Sutras, Bhakti is the nature of the highest form of love. The highest form of love. Parama prema rupa, like the form, the essence. Rupa is like the body, the essence, the form of the highest form of love. And it's the nature of Amrit. Amrit is a word that means immortality. But it's also in the Puranas, Amrit is used, the word is used to describe a substance. So like the nectar of immortality. The nectar of immortality, the substance that when you drink it, it makes you immortal. So in the Puranas, there's this kind of stories about this actual nectar, but it's the essence, it's the sap of life, it's the delight of existence that is immortal, and that when you are in contact with that delight of being, is the pure delight of existence, you are immortal, because that delight is immortal. Your being is immortal. The I am presence that is you, your essential being, is immortal. So when you touch the natural delight, the Satchidananda, the natural delight of existence, you touch that immortality. This is Amrit. So Bhakti is of the nature of Amrit. It's of the nature of, so Rupa again is the word that's used. It's like the body of Amrit. And attaining it, a person becomes perfected, immortal, and content. Having reached Bhakti, a person neither desires anything, nor grieves, hates, enjoys anything else, or is active in pursuit of selfish ends. One becomes ecstatic, stilled, and one comes to delight in the self. So this is the kind of definition of Bhakti. And it's a state, again, it's a process, it's a practice, and it's a state. And in that state, one that doesn't desire anything else. There's no grief, there's no hatred, there's no enjoyment of anything else. And there's no reaching for selfish things. This is the essence of Bhakti. And Bhakti Yoga takes the emotions. It takes, we are in the world with our bodies. We're in the world with our minds. We're in the world with our will and our intelligence, and we're moving around. And we're also in the world with our emotions. We're interacting with people on an emotional level all the time. We experience emotions. We carry emotions. We trade emotions. Our emotional being is an integral aspect of ourself. And Bhakti Yoga is the purification or upliftment of those emotions. So as we've said many times, there are evolutionary forces and there are counter-evolutionary forces. Evolutionary forces are forces that bring us forward towards self-realization and wholeness. Counter-evolutionary forces are forces that push against and drag us back towards isolation and separation. So evolutionary forces that bring us towards wholeness, bring us towards an experience of oneness with everything, which is love. That experience of oneness with everything is love. And so Bhakti on an emotional level is drawing all of our emotions into that experience of oneness. Emotions that are reaching upwards towards that experience of oneness. Longing for the divine is a divine emotion, is an emotion central to Bhakti. Longing for something temporal, something temporary, longing for money, longing for appreciation, longing for recognition, reward. These are emotions that are pulling back towards the sense of isolation and separateness. So there are evolutionary emotions and there are counter-evolutionary emotions. Hatred, enmity, greed, lust, anger, all these things are counter-evolutionary. They reinforce our sense of separateness. Longing for the divine, love for others. Love is basically, I see myself in you. It's a statement of, we are one. It's an experience, an embodied experience of oneness. Now, what we call love today, a lot of times, is not the kind of love that I'm talking about. What we call love, what we see in movies as love, what we hear in songs, is reinforced all around us all the time as love is mostly attachment. And that is not evolutionary. That is not drawing us towards self-realization. That's pulling us back towards the experience of separation and isolation. I need you is an experience of separation and isolation. I love you is a fountain. I love you is an endless fountain that pours out of me without any need. I don't need you to be anything. I don't need you to do anything. The love comes freely and offers itself to you without any hesitation or without any trappings, without any, there's a word that's not there. This free flow of love, this is Bhakti. And in the Bhakti traditions, basically there was a movement in India that started in Tamil Nadu in the south in 5th, 6th century. And I've talked about this before, there was this accretion of ritualism, accretion of caste system, accretion of rules, and these people can talk to God and these people can't talk to God, and the people who can talk to God are better, and these people are eligible for liberation and self-realization, and these people are only eligible for cleaning toilets and doing things that, whatever, that make them dirty, and then we can't touch them. This was the kind of the castification of society. The Bhakti movement was like, no. Love is love. Love does not say that somebody is worse than me. Love does not say that somebody can't discover themselves and discover God. Love is just love. And a lot of this flowed through, they were kind of subtle revolutionary movements that flowed through songs and poems, and songs that were like folk music, as opposed to like classical Indian music, which is, you have to know how to do everything perfectly. The ragas are similar in a way to the rituals, everything in its perfect place, everything perfectly. Folk music is much more lively and free and open. These Bhakti movements were democratic in that sense. They were, let's just throw the doors open and invite everybody in. And you don't need to know how to say, Agnimi ile parohitam yagyasya devam ritmijam hotaram ratnadatamam. You don't need to know how to chant Vedic mantras. You can say Hare Krishna, Sitaram, 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 Sitaram. Anybody can say Sitaram. I love God. You say the names of the divine, Radhe Shyam, Govinda Hare. Just say God's name. Just say God's name and love God. And this was the kind of, it evolved from South India up into the north over a course of centuries. And most of the famous Bhakti singers and poets that that are known through in the West are from the north, so like Mirabai, and she was from Rajasthan. Rumi and Hafiz and Kabir are also kind of contemporaneous with this, and Sufi Islam is, kind of happening at the same time. Both of them want to take credit for influencing the other one, and you can't say which one is which really, but there's this devotion that flows through that's democratic, that breaks down the rigidification of the religion and opens the doors of divine love to everybody. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in Puri. He was, he embodied the love of Krishna and Radha for each other. And he embodied the love of Radha for Krishna. His life was basically just a wail, a great wail of longing for the divine. And he lived that, and he invited people to sing God's name all the time. And he inspired many, many people. And the whole modern Hare Krishna movement, which was started by Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada, he was inspired. It's basically, he was in that lineage from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Tulsidas rewrote the Ramayana in a totally, devotional kind of way. A text called the Ramacharita Manasa. He wrote the Hanuman Chalisa. He wrote these beautiful poems of devotional love. There was the teachers of Abhinavagupta in the Kashmir Shaiva tradition who were also writing devotional poetry to Shiva at that time. And even farther back, there were the Nayanars in Tamil Nadu and the Alvars. The Nayanars were devotees of Shiva and the Alvars were devotees of Vishnu. And they wrote this exquisite, beautiful devotional poetry. And the Tirumantaram, which I quoted in the text, it's like God and love are one. Anbe Shivam, Anbe Shivam. God is love. This is, a fundamental teaching of this, Shaiva Siddhanta, the tantric tradition of Shaivism in Tamil Nadu in the early 1st century. Anbe Shivam, God and love are one. And there's these intense stories of longing, stories, songs, poems that really captivate and kind of curate and concentrate that experience of longing for the divine as a lover, as a mother, as, the love of a mother for a child, the love of a child for its mother, the love of a brother to a brother to a sister, the love of two beloveds, all the different kinds of love, the love of a servant to a master, all these different aspects of love that happen in life. It's basically taking all these aspects of love and channeling them towards the divine. So seeing the divine as a Lord, loving the divine as a Lord, seeing the divine as a beloved, as a lover, and loving the divine that way, seeing the divine as a mother, and generative, who gives us everything, seeing the divine in Krishna, the baby Krishna embodies divinity as the small child, that love that we have, that just spontaneously comes when you see a baby, that also, it can be a form of bhakti. And the bhakti movement, it moves through these folk traditions, through, kind of outside of the upper echelons of society, the formality of society, and really transforms India so that today, most people either think of themselves as Vaishnavites or Shaivites. Most Indians, what you could call Hindus, think of themselves as either Vaishnavites or Shaivites. And this is like, I think 90% of Hindus are either Vaishnavites or Shaivites. And that means they worship, they revere, they love Shiva, or they love Vishnu. And this bhakti has really persisted into daily life, into the families, the traditions of families, the traditions of communities, the lives of individual people who have a relationship with their Ishtadevata. There's Vishnu, as the kind of central kind of structure Vaishnavism. But, Vishnu is Krishna, Vishnu is Ram. Hanuman is a character in the Vishnu tales. Lakshmi is married to Vishnu. Sita is married to Ram. Radha is Krishna's beloved. So that Yashoda is Krishna's mother. There's all these different divine beings that one might have a relationship with. Ganesh is Shiva's son. So Parvati is Shiva's wife. Skanda is Shiva's other son. So there's, people have their Ishta Devata. Many Indians have an Ishta Devata, their own personal divine Lord that they worship and love and cultivate and have pictures of and relate to most closely. But all this is a result of this movement of bhakti that flowed through the country between, say, 500 AD and, the peak in the north was around like 1600s, I think. And then a lot of the stuff, some of these things, Mirabai, who is notable as kind of the only woman in the north who was a famous bhakti poet. Nothing was written about her until like 150 years after she lived. And so a lot of the stories of her life nobody's quite sure. There's a lot of things that contradict each other. Nobody's quite sure about her, but there's these poems that exist that are signed by her, that she wrote, that are just really beautiful. And yeah, I think I got rid of that. I meant to get one of her things. But it's like, it's like, Krishna, if you're not going to return my love for you is so profound and deep that if you're not going to return my love, I don't even want to be alive. That's the essence, the intensity of it. And that's also reflected. I do have this one quote. Ramana Maharshi, who I've talked about as this Jnana yogi, who teaches about who am I, to the point where you realize that, all the sense of that I have of myself is nothing, is not real, is an illusion. He was also a bhakta, and he wrote this poem called Aksharamanamala. And apparently the story is that he used to sing these devotional Shiva poems, Shiva songs, Shiva bhakti songs. And one day somebody asked him, why don't you ever write anything? And he was like, no, I don't write songs. And then he used to go and walk around Arunachala, do the Girivalam, circumambulate the mountain all the time. And the story is that one day he started walking and he wrote this poem. It's 108 verses in one trip around the mountain. I don't know if somebody was walking next to him and writing it down, or if he somehow memorized it, but it's quite long. It's in Tamil, but I'm just going to give you a rough translation of the first few lines. O Arunachala, you root out the egoism of those who think I am Arunachala. Like the words Aragu and Sundara. Aragu is Tamil for beauty and Sundara is Sanskrit for beauty. So like these two words that both mean beauty, let me and you be completely non-different. Oh, Arunachala, what a wonder that you did enter my mind and rescued me, holding me captive in the cave of your heart. For whose sake did you rescue me, if now you're going to reject me? The world will accuse you. Save yourself from this accusation. Why did you make me pine for you? Who will, after this, leave you? Who will, after knowing you, ever want to leave you? You are the one who showers grace, which is greater than that of one's own mother. Is this your grace? Be firmly seated in my heart, so that my heart might not run away, duping me. Reveal your beauty so my mind, which is always roving around, may get quiet, seeing you uninterruptedly. If you don't join me now, destroying my ego, is this your manliness? I mean, he is embodying the bride, Akshara Manamalai is the marriage garland that the bride places over the groom during a marriage. And he calls this poem the marriage garland of letters. So it's a poem that embodies this marriage garland. And he is the bride. And he's saying to the groom, if you don't join me now and destroy my egoism, is this your manliness? Is this, he's really kind of taking on this embodying this sense of the beloved to Shiva, to Arunachala Shiva. And this is the guy who's, who am I, nothing, like destroy the ego. But here he is embodying this intense love and devotion and saying to Arunachala, come on, you dragged me all the way here. You made me love you and you're just going to turn away? How can I live now? How can I live without you? You made me love you and now you expect me to live, in your presence, but you have your back turned to me. So this is like a highly evolved yogi, like embodying this sense of being spurned by the lover. This is bhakti yoga. It's like taking these emotions and cultivating them, cooking them, cooking, what do you say, making a reduction, boiling it until it's just condensed. The flavor is so rich. And these poems come from this deep place of this really concentrated love that's been nurtured and cultivated over time. Why this sleep? Arunachala, why this sleep? While others are dragging me away, does this become you? When my five senses, the thieves, entered my heart, were you not there? Deceiving you, you who are one without a second, who will come in? This is your trickery. You are the meaning of the sacred syllable Om. You are without an equal. Who can understand you? So it's like this, and I'll read another Shiva. This is from Utpaladeva, who was a teacher of Abhinavagupta. And this, the commentary and translation is by a teacher named Swami Lakshmanju, who passed away not too long ago, within the past 20 years, 15 or 20 years. He was a Kashmir Shaiva teacher in the north. And he translates this, he's kind of loose with this translation, but, O Lord Shiva, let all these crises fall only on me. The crises of the world, the oppressions of the world, the ruins of the world, disastrous things of the world. Let these fall on me. I welcome them, but I must be embraced with you. My body must be embraced with you. Let all of those crush me. Let them. I welcome them. Let them fall on me. Let myself be soaked in that. But my body must be embraced by you. When I will be in your arms, I will become only fearless. I will become intoxicated by those disastrous flows. I will love them. I will welcome them. When I am in your arms, I can bear anything. It's basically what he's saying, When I'm being held by you, embraced by you, I can handle anything that comes upon me. Any difficulty of the world, let me take it on, let me have it, but just hold me. This poignancy of love and devotion, it's incredible. That's Utpaladeva. And I'll read one more thing. This is from Ramacharitamanasa by Tulsidas. So this is a kind of reworking of the Ramayana, which we've talked about a little bit, the story about Ram and Sita. And Tulsidas says, he who renounces his caste and his kin, his wealth and his glory, and I'm using the he here because it's here, but this is not meant just for people who identify as male. So let's say, one who announces their caste and kin, wealth, duty, and glory, their dear kin and happy home, and treasures in their soul. Treasures in their soul, you alone. O Ram, take up your abode there. The one to whom heaven and hell and liberation are all one, for they hold but you everywhere, armed with your bows and arrows, who is the person who is your servant in thought and word and deed. In this person's heart, O Rama, make your permanent abode. The one who never asks for anything but is devoted to you with a simple, spontaneous devotion. In this one's heart, live forever. For isn't that your very home? So Bhakti has, teachings and this kind of, in the same way that Jnana Yoga has specific practices and kind of digs into the architecture of the mind and really says like, well, this part of the mind does this part of the mind does that. There's the memory, there's the ahankar, the I maker, there's the five senses, there's the mind that integrates the five senses, there's the higher mind, this kind of anatomy of the inner space that Jnana Yoga does. Bhakti Yoga, there's the same relationship to emotions. There's a kind of breakdown and discussion and discernment about all the different emotions and how they lead in different directions and what they do and what their purpose is. Bhakti Yoga includes even enmity as something, there's like the science of Bhakti Yoga in a way, which is a little bit strange to say because science is in a way inherently intellectual, but there's the kind of, categorization of all the different kinds of emotions and how they can be leveraged to lead one towards liberation and divine union. And then there's the stories of Bhakti, the stories of Ramacharita Manasa, the stories of Krishna in the Bhagavata Purana, the stories of Shiva Bhakti Valasam, the stories, these Bhakti stories. And in these stories, when Ravana fights Ram and Ram kills Ravana, Ravana is liberated. So Ravana's hatred towards Krishna is considered a form of, towards Ram, is considered a form of Bhakti. When Krishna kills Kamsa, Kamsa's hatred of Krishna is considered a form of Bhakti because in the end, it's the touch of the divine that liberates that being. And they were playing out their role. So, in these stories, it's often, everything in relationship to the divine, any and all relationship to the divine is love, is devotion, is reverence, because the divine is, they draw that out of us. The divine draws love and devotion out of us like a magnet. So just being in the presence of the divine one, whether it's Krishna or Ram or Shiva or Ganesh or whoever, being in the presence of that one automatically pulls devotion and reverence out of us. So even if we feel that devotion and reverence in the form of enmity, that's fine. In the end, it will all resolve itself. We will be liberated through the touch of that divine one, no matter what our relationship is with it. And these three paths, Bhakti, Jnana, and Karma Yoga, they all come together in the end. They all lead to the same place. And ultimately, if you love God, you will know God. If you know God, you will love God. You can't know God without loving God. You can't love God fully and completely with all your being without knowing the object of that love. And when you act, when you offer your life, your actions to God, you will love God. And you will also know God. And when you love God, you will offer all your actions to God. It's like they all start in different places and approach the same direction from different spots, but they all, at a certain point, you can't pull them apart from each other. You can start out intending to live a life of karma yoga or bhakti yoga or jnana yoga. You can start out with that intention, but eventually they're all going to merge into one, and the path becomes just one path. And I think there's a way in which we think of our yoga process like that sometimes, or our spiritual process like that. Like we have a certain path and a certain way, and this is how we do it, and this is how we relate to the divine or to ourselves or towards self-realization. And the truth is that that can change in a life. And as we exceed, as we grow, as we develop, it often does change. And giving ourselves the freedom to be in that change, to allow that change, is really important. Just knowing that it's okay that I'm different today than I was yesterday, knowing that it's okay that I'm drawn in a certain direction today. If I'm sincere about where I'm being drawn, if I'm sincere about the inner inquiry, about where my path is taking me, then, it's good to be new, to allow myself to be new in every moment, in every day, and not, no, this is who I am. I define myself like this. I am this kind of a yogi. I'm this kind of a seeker. I'm on this kind of a path. Let the path decide for you. Let the path lead you rather than, trying to decide what the path should and should not be doing. And this just gives more freedom for these different approaches, whether it's these three approaches or other approaches, to weave together and become unified in one single approach.